The bus stopped at the edge of town just as the first pale light cracked the horizon. It wasn't much of a town, just a ribbon of silent houses curling between the hills, their windows shuttered, their mailboxes hanging open like yawning mouths. The driver refused to look at me as I stepped off, muttering something about schedules and sunrises. I'd heard the rumors, of course, how people here vanished when dawn came. But rumors are only noise until they echo in your own bones. I walked down the main street. The air still cool and heavy, and every footstep seemed to sink deeper into quiet. There were cars in driveways, doors ajar, breakfast tables set for no one. And then the wind shifted, carrying the faintest whisper of something human, something gone. I turned toward the sound, but the world was already beginning to bleach, color fading like breath on glass. And in that instant, I understood why no one ever stayed past sunrise. By mid-morning, the silence had become unbearable. I found myself whispering just to hear something human, but my voice didn't carry. It was swallowed by air too dense with quiet. Every home I entered was paused in motion, forks halfway to mouths, newspapers folded beside cups of tea still warm. It was as if time had stalled between seconds. I kept thinking I'd find someone asleep, hidden, playing some cruel joke. But then I noticed the shadows, or rather, their absence. Everything in town cast a faint shimmer instead, like reflections in glass. I walked past a mirror and saw my own reflection flicker like a poor signal. The dread settled in deep then. Maybe the disappearing wasn't sudden. Maybe it was spreading. I followed the town's single road toward its heart, where a clock tower loomed, hands locked at 6:12. Beneath it, the square was filled with remnants of a life paused. Shopping bags, bicycles, a stroller without a child. I called out again, louder, until my throat ached. No echo returned. Then the wind rose, carrying something faintly melodic, like distant humming. I turned in slow circles, scanning empty rooftops. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, seeping from walls, from air, from memory. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the tune sank through bone. It wasn't meant for me. It was a memory of the town itself, replaying the last sound before it all went quiet. The sound faded as abruptly as it came, leaving behind only the faint crackle of sunlight. I noticed then that my phone, dead since the bus ride, had begun to flicker, screen pulsing with ghost signals. A single notification blinked repeatedly. Leave before sunrise. My heart stuttered. The sun had already risen hours ago. I tried calling out again, but now even my voice refused to emerge, as though the air itself rejected it. My thoughts felt heavier, like gravity was thickening. The buildings shimmered faintly in the periphery, outlines dissolving. I stumbled backward, desperate for movement, for something that stayed still long enough to be real. By the time I reached the outskirts again, the mist had thickened into a golden fog. The bus stop was empty. My footprints behind me had vanished, absorbed by the dust. I stood beneath a flickering street lamp, watching its glow fade in and out with the rhythm of my heartbeat. Somewhere far away, a bell rang once, then twice, then fell silent. I didn't know if it was calling me to stay, or warning me that staying was impossible. The sun climbed higher, each ray sharper, heavier, until it no longer felt like light but pressure. I turned toward the road leading out and saw nothing ahead but brilliance. I stepped forward anyway, and the world sighed as if exhaling me. The fog followed me long after the town disappeared from view. It clung to the air, thick and slow, as if reluctant to let me go. The road curved endlessly ahead, bordered by empty fields where nothing stirred. My phone buzzed once more, just static this time, no words, and then went dark again. I felt as though I was walking between two worlds, one too quiet to be alive, the other too bright to be real. Somewhere behind me, A faint sound echoed. A footstep that wasn't mine. I turned, heart pounding, but the road lay empty. Still, the sense of being followed lingered. Every few seconds I'd catch a glimpse of movement at the edge of the fog, the hint of a shape that melted away when I tried to focus. The dawn was behind me now, but its light still chased me like a warning. I reached a signpost half buried in dust. Welcome to Solace. Population 482. Someone had crossed out the number and written 0 beneath it. The metal creaked softly in the wind, and I felt an ache bloom in my chest. Not grief exactly, but something adjacent, like nostalgia for something that never belonged to me. I wondered what it meant to vanish here. Did they fade slowly, piece by piece, or all at once like a collective breath drawn and never released? I touched the rusted sign, expecting coldness, but it was warm like skin. That was when I noticed the faint handprint beside mine. Newer, smaller. The air shifted, the silence bent, and I realized I was no longer alone on the road. The figure emerged just beyond the fog's threshold, small, deliberate steps on gravel. I froze. It was a girl, no older than 10, wearing a pale yellow dress stained at the hem. Her hair was damp, clinging to her face as she looked up at me with wide, hollow eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, though her lips never moved. The words arrived inside my head like an echo. I knelt down, my voice shaking, asking who she was. She blinked once, slowly, and pointed toward the horizon, where the light was thickest. "They wake with the sun?" she said, or thought, and then the fog began to ripple behind her as if something enormous had stirred awake. When I blinked, Elsie was gone. Only her footprints remained, small impressions that sank deeper into the dirt until they vanished completely. I ran toward where she had pointed. The landscape began to shift. The road narrowed, bending inward, until it felt like I was walking inside a loop. The light grew sharper, whiter, pressing against my eyes, until tears blurred my vision. My body felt both heavy and distant, like I was moving underwater. Somewhere, beneath the blinding hum, I could hear the faint echo of children laughing. I tried to follow the sound, but every time I turned, it came from another direction. The fog pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. I whispered Elsie's name, even though I didn't know if it belonged to her anymore. I stumbled into what looked like the remains of another town, just a few broken houses half swallowed by fog. Each window reflected the same empty street from a different angle, as though the place itself was folding in on memory. I entered one of the homes and saw my own reflection, staring back from every surface. Mirrors, glass, even puddles on the floor. They weren't synchronized. Each version of me moved a heartbeat out of time, watching with detached pity. One lifted her hand and pointed at the window. Outside, the horizon pulsed gold and white, like a heartbeat expanding to fill the sky. For the first time, I wondered if disappearing here meant being remembered somewhere else. The mirrors shattered when the light outside reached its peak. The sound was deafening, like ice breaking underwater. When I looked again, the reflections were gone, but the air itself shimmered with their residue. I stepped back into the fog, feeling its weight press down heavy and alive. The road behind me had vanished completely, leaving only a faint trail of footprints that dissolved as soon as I noticed them. The world had become circular, an endless loop of dawn. I tried to recall how long I'd been walking, hours, days, but memory refused to hold its shape. The only thing that felt real was the warmth still clinging to my skin, the pulse of sunlight that seemed to breathe with me. And somewhere in that bright stillness, I heard the faint echo of my own voice, calling out from a direction that no longer existed. The fog thinned just enough to reveal the outline of a lake. Its surface was unnaturally still, a mirror stretched flat against the world. I approached cautiously, my reflection forming before I reached the water's edge. It looked like me, but older, eyes hollowed, skin pale as moonlight. She smiled faintly, and I knew she wasn't smiling at me. I knelt, searching for a ripple, a sign that the lake was real. But the surface didn't move even as I touched it. Instead, my reflection reached back. Her fingers met mine through the barrier, and the cold burned instant. I yanked my hand away, gasping. When I looked again, she was gone, but the water still shimmered faintly. And deep beneath its surface, I saw countless faces waiting to surface. I walked the lake's perimeter until the ground gave way to grass and forgotten fences. The air smelled faintly of ozone and rust. That's when I saw them, figures frozen in mid-motion, scattered across the field like statues. Each one cast a faint glow from within, translucent, as though made of mist and memory. I recognized some of their faces. The man from the bus, the driver, the girl in yellow. Their eyes were open, but they didn't see me. I reached toward one, and for a moment, warmth surged through my palm. Then pain, sharp and electric. A flash of images struck me. Sunlight over the town. Laughter. Then sudden white silence. I stumbled back, gasping, realizing I had felt the moment they vanished. The dawn didn't take them. It absorbed them. Night never came. The light only deepened into amber, then into a white so soft it hurt to stare at. My shadow had disappeared entirely now. The silence hummed like a low frequency beneath my skin. I began to wonder if I had already disappeared too, just slower than the rest. My thoughts came in fragments, half remembered and hollow. I spoke aloud to keep my voice alive, to anchor myself in the sound. But even that began to echo strangely, as if spoken by someone else. Somewhere far ahead, I saw motion. Something large, shifting slowly against the brightness. I started walking toward it, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe to prove I still could. The figure resolved as I drew closer. A man standing ankle-deep in light, his face serene, his body almost translucent. He looked at me as though I'd been expected. "You stayed too long," he said softly, and his voice sounded like wind moving through glass. I wanted to ask what that meant, but no words formed. He lifted his hand, and I saw his veins glowing faintly beneath the skin, like threads of sunlight. Around us, the air began to ripple, the horizon bending inward. I felt the warmth seep through my bones, neither comforting nor cruel, just inevitable. "The sun keeps what it touches," he whispered, and as the light surged, I realized it wasn't rising anymore. It was consuming. The world blinked, and when it opened again, the light had dimmed, just enough for color to bleed back in. The ground beneath me wasn't earth anymore but glass, smooth and endless, reflecting a pale version of the sky. I could see myself stretched infinitely below, hundreds of maras layered beneath my feet, each one moving slightly out of sync. The man of light was gone, though his words lingered, echoing inside my skull. "The sun keeps what it touches." I walked, but each step left no trace, no sound. The air shimmered faintly with the pulse of something living underneath the surface. Then I saw the outlines of the town again, upside down in the reflection. Its streets, its houses, its people still moving. I pressed my hand against the glass, desperate to break through, but the reflection only stared back with quiet pity. A distant hum filled the air, like the sound of 1,000 wings beating in unison. I turned, and the horizon fractured, thin lines of darkness slicing through the golden atmosphere. From those cracks poured shapes, not people exactly, but silhouettes formed from dust and light. They drifted toward me slowly, their movements elegant, deliberate, like dancers underwater. I backed away, but they mirrored every motion, closing in with silent grace. One reached forward, its fingers barely defined, the shape trembling as though it struggled to hold itself together. When it touched my arm, the skin beneath shimmered with faint gold, and for an instant, I saw every sunrise I had ever lived through, condensed into a single blinding moment. The beings faded as suddenly as they appeared, leaving behind a faint warmth in the air. I stood trembling, staring at my arm where the mark pulsed like a heartbeat. I realized it wasn't fading. It was spreading. The glow moved up my veins toward my shoulder, slow and rhythmic, sensing with each breath I took. Panic clawed its way into my chest, but part of me felt an odd calm, as if something inside whispered to let it happen. My surroundings began to flicker again. The glass plane, the golden sky, shifting between here and somewhere else. The town was visible below once more, but now I could hear them. Faint voices, laughter, and the echo of life continuing without me. They weren't gone. They had simply crossed over. The air thickened again, and the horizon began to curve upward, enclosing me. I could no longer tell where sky ended and ground began. Everything felt circular, recursive, as though the world was closing its own loop. I felt the pull of gravity, or something like it, drawing me downward toward my reflection. I resisted at first, clawing at the unseen ground, but then I saw the other me below smile faintly. She looked calm, whole, untouched by the fog or the fear. She reached upward, palm open, and I understood. Maybe she wasn't another me at all. Maybe she was what was left when the light finally stopped erasing. I took a deep breath, then reached down to meet her hand. Contact felt like falling and floating at once. My breath caught as the reflection's hand gripped mine, and the glass beneath us shattered, not with violence but release. I fell through the light, surrounded by fragments of dawn cascading like slow snow. The sound of the world dimmed until all that remained was the soft thrum of my pulse blending into the hum of the sky. Then, for the first time, darkness bloomed, gentle, cool, absolute. When I opened my eyes, I stood once again at the edge of the town, but it was night now. The houses were whole. The air was alive with the faint chirp of crickets. The sunrise had finally ended. Or maybe it was just waiting for me to look away. The night felt fragile, like a painting too long exposed to the sun. Every sound, the whisper of leaves, the soft hum of wind, felt newly born, unsure if it should exist. I walked through the streets that had once been empty and found them whole again. Lights glowing in windows, the faint scent of bread and coffee drifting through the air. But the stillness beneath it all was wrong. I passed people who didn't seem to see me. Neighbors sweeping porches, a man locking his store, a child chasing a paper kite. Their motions were fluid, yet their eyes were blank, unfocused. I called out to one, but my voice slipped past them like smoke. When I looked down, I saw no shadow beneath my feet. I wasn't sure if I'd come back to the town or if the town had come back to me. I followed the sound of laughter to the town square. A fair was in progress. Music, lights, children running beneath string lanterns. The clock tower loomed above, its hands finally moving again, ticking softly with the rhythm of the crowd. For a moment, I thought maybe it had all been a fever dream. Then I noticed something strange. The lanterns didn't cast shadows. They hovered mid-air, flickering but never swaying. I touched one and felt a pulse beneath the paper skin, like a heartbeat. The music slowed, each note stretching longer, echoing hollowly across the square. I turned in a slow circle and saw them. The glowing outlines around everyone's bodies, faint but unmistakable. The same light that had started in me. The music stopped. The laughter froze mid-sound. All motion ceased except mine. I stood in a tableau of stillness, the air heavy with expectation. The clock struck once, midnight, and everything flickered. The townspeople turned in unison, their empty eyes now filled with faint light. They looked through me, not at me, and began whispering words I couldn't understand. Their voices rose in a single sustained note that made the air vibrate. I covered my ears, But the sound wasn't heard. It was felt, a hum through the bones. The gold mark on my arm flared, answering them. For a heartbeat, I understood. This was their dawn, the endless rising they were bound to. And I was still part of it. The light spread faster now, spilling from them into the ground, into the air, into me. I staggered backward, clutching my arm as the veins glowed brighter than ever. "Not again," I whispered, though the words came out soundless. I turned and ran through the fair, past motionless faces and drifting lanterns. The streets began to blur, folding over themselves like film spooling backward. The houses melted into light, the sky brightened too quickly. It wasn't morning yet, but dawn was coming anyway. My lungs burned as I reached the outskirts of town again. The fog was waiting, patient and gold. Behind me, I heard the town exhale, a sigh that seemed to stretch across eternity. I reached the same sign where this began. "Welcome to Solace." Only now, the number beneath the population had changed again. 483. I stared at it, breath shaking, as the fog began to creep around my ankles. I tried to step back, but my body refused to move. The golden light rose higher, brushing my face, my hands. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the bus engine hum, a promise or a trap. I couldn't tell. My heartbeat slowed, matching the faint rhythm pulsing through the ground. The air shimmered. I looked at my reflection in the metal sign and saw what the town had made of me. Eyes glowing faintly, skin the color of dawn. The sun was rising again, and this time, it wasn't letting go. The dawn rose in silence, yet every sound within it was deafening. The hiss of fog, the hum of sunlight, the pulse of my blood echoing inside the light. I didn't remember closing my eyes, but when I opened them, I was standing in the same town again. Everything was as it had been before I arrived. The streets lined with still cars, curtains drawn, mailboxes hanging open. The difference was me. My reflection followed too closely now, like it was trying to overtake me. When I walked, it hesitated half a second, as if deciding whether to mimic or replace. I tested my voice, calling out into the empty air. The echo that came back wasn't mine. It was smoother, steadier, as though something else had learned how to sound human. I followed the echo through town, drawn toward the clock tower again. Its hands moved now, turning backward, shedding sparks of light as they spun. The air was dense with the faint scent of ozone and heat, like the moment before lightning strikes. I climbed the stairs, each step humming beneath my feet. At the top, the view was endless. Fog and gold stitched together into an unbroken horizon. Then I saw her. The reflection that wasn't me. She stood beside the clock face, gazing out at the sunrise as though it belonged to her. When she turned, her eyes were calm. "You came back," she said in my voice. "You always do." She moved closer, her steps silent. The air between us shimmered, bending light as if reluctant to let us touch. "What are you?" I asked, though I already knew. She smiled faintly, the same way I had when I first arrived in Solace. "You wanted to understand," she said. "You wanted to see where they went." Her hand brushed mine, and the contact sent ripples through both of us, like two halves of a reflection trying to merge. Behind her, the light grew stronger, pressing through her body until she was almost transparent. I felt my own skin respond, glowing in rhythm. For a fleeting instant, I couldn't tell which of us was real. The tower shuddered, its metal bones groaning as the clock hands fractured mid-turn. Shards of glass rained around us, catching light like falling stars. My reflection stepped closer still, our movements sensing perfectly now. "You can stay," she whispered. "Or you can fade." I didn't answer. My mind was full of echoes, voices of everyone who had disappeared, soft and weightless, inviting. I thought of the town, of Elsie, and the driver, and the laughter frozen in air. Maybe none of it was ever gone. Maybe it had only shifted into the light. The reflection reached up, her palm pressed against my chest, and warmth spread outward, erasing fear. The moment stretched infinitely, like time had decided to hold its breath. Then the reflection whispered, "You're part of the morning now." And everything fell quiet. The tower disintegrated into brilliance. I wasn't falling or floating. I was expanding, scattered into particles of gold drifting across the horizon. The world unfolded beneath me, luminous and still. I saw every house, every street, every sleeping form waiting for dawn. I wasn't separate anymore. I was the warmth crawling across the rooftops, the hum in the fog, the breath in the wind before the sun touched skin. Solace was not a town. It was a cycle. And I was its newest sunrise. Morning came without warning, if it could still be called that. The sun didn't rise. It arrived all at once, flooding the horizon with gold so thick it erased shadow and sound alike. I existed everywhere and nowhere, stretched thin across the light. Through it, I could see Solace breathing, each house inhaling the dawn, each window sighing with color. Time folded softly, and in its reflection the people stirred again. They moved not as before, but as echoes. Gentle impressions left behind to keep the memory of living alive. I felt their warmth, their laughter, the fragments of their final moments carried endlessly through the glow. And deep within it all, something pulsed, tethering me still, a whisper. My own voice calling from below. Remember why you came. Why? I drifted through the streets without feet to carry me, touching memories instead of walls. Every building I passed hummed faintly, replaying fragments of life before the dawn. A family's laughter over breakfast, the thud of footsteps racing to catch a bus, a song playing faintly through a window. The sounds looped, like fragile recordings refusing to fade. I understood then. The town hadn't disappeared. It had been preserved, sealed inside its final sunrise, endlessly repeating the moment before loss. I reached toward one of the doorways, my hand dissolving into gold mist as it met the threshold. The warmth there wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the light. Somewhere in the brightness I found the girl again. Elsie, standing in the middle of the square, holding her paper kite. She looked up as I approached, her eyes shimmering like liquid sunlight. "You came back," she said softly, her voice echoing without sound. "We all do." The kite in her hand began to rise on its own, glowing faintly before dissolving into dust. "Will it stop?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She shook her head. "The sun doesn't stop. It remembers." Her smile was kind, almost human. Then she stepped back, merging with the light until only her outline remained, carved into eternity. The bell tower rang again, not with metal, but with light. A tone that rippled through the fog, through me, through everything. With each resonance, parts of the world began to lift, turning to gold dust carried upward. Houses, trees, streets, everything ascending slowly, gracefully. I felt myself rising too, unafraid this time. My body was only memory now, my mind only warmth. But even as I rose, I turned once more toward the horizon. There was something there, a flicker of movement just beyond the light's reach, a shape still walking, still human, still searching, a new arrival, another soul stepping off a bus into Solace. The cycle continued. Light deepened into something softer, almost tender. For the first time, it didn't feel like erasure. It felt like release. I closed my eyes and let the warmth claim what was left of me. My name, my fear, my purpose. They drifted away like feathers. All that remained was the hum, steady and infinite, echoing through the light. Somewhere below, the new traveler would soon find the same silence, the same whisper of vanishing. And when the sun rose again, I would be there, woven into the fog, into the glass, into the breath of dawn itself. Solace would open its eyes once more, and the world, unaware, would keep turning toward the light that never ended.